Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with number 109 in the series Viewers Games. This one is from funny animator Jim TV. I don't know his real name, I always call him Jim because he is quite active in the comments and the emails, but I don't know if that is his real name. On the 14th of September 2019 he played a online classical match, 15 minutes plus a 15-second increment per move. I played white and played a reversed Dark Knight Pirc. Please enjoy. Jim says his rating is 2042 on this platform. I'm not sure if it's chess.com or Lichess. Anyway, a rating above 2000, and his opponent is Kasparsen Black with a rating of 2090. So about 50 points more than our hero Jim. Let's see what happened. Jim has extensively annotated this game, so I'm using a lot of his comments in this video. Thank you, Jim, for all the work you put into this. You made my life a lot easier. Jim opened with knight c3, and he said this is not as popular as other white first moves, but I like to be different and get off the beaten path. Sometimes it can transpose into lines my opponent is not familiar with. And then he digresses on move 1 already. He shows what this Dark Knight Pirc is all about. He showed e4, knight c6. He's going to show the Pirc for black because it's an opening that black plays. But Jim is going to play it on the white side. But let's see what it is about. Knight f3, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3 and then g6. And that is the so-called Dark Knight Pirc. A variation of the classical Pirc where black puts a knight on c6 very early. It does not really have a name, so a book author coined this line the Dark Knight Pirc. So now we know what it is, and white is going to play that setup. Knight f6 from Jim's opponent. Jim says here white can play e4, which may be more in the spirit of knight c3 and may be better. But I like the quieter g3. As a bonus it helps me practice these Pirc positions more. So e4 is possible, as Jim says, but he played g3 after 24 seconds of thought. Knight c6, both knights are into the game. Bishop g2, and here Jim says none of us are moving our center pawns. And then black plays d5 and Jim says never mind. Very funny. d3. And the other pawn also goes into the center. And Jim says, here I considered bishop g5, but I thought black would play bishop e6, and that would be it for now. Bishop g5 can be a common idea in these positions to put pressure on the d5 pawn. It's very nice seeing all the pieces working for a common goal. So Jim is talking about bishop g5. He then says that black can play bishop e6. And he says the idea of bishop g5 is to put pressure on this d5 pawn. Because with the bishop on g5, the knight is pinned, which means that this pawn is under pressure. It's not defended by the knight anymore. But Jim decided against bishop g5 in this game. He played knight f3, calling this the Light Knight Pirc, or the reserve Dark Knight Pirc. See the sideline on move 1. Yes, we looked at that. Bishop b4. Now black is pinning white's knight. a3. Jim says he thought about not playing a3, but I played it anyway. Black decides to take on c3. B takes, castling, and white also castled. Jim says white's plan is to complete development and use the c and a pawns on the queen side. Knight e2 and c4 helps to open the g2 bishop. So he wants to play up these pawns, or at least one of them. And when he plays the knight back to d2, that will help opening up the bishop on g2. Bishop e6 from black developing, keeping an eye on c4, the c4 square as Jim says. Rook b1 on the half open file, that's where rooks want to be. Rook b8 defending the b7 pawn. Knight d2 as planned. Rook e8. And there comes the c-pawn, c4. The queen went to d6, and Jim took on d5. Bishop takes, queen takes. Here Jim says, here I had a really important decision to make. Do I play e4 or c4? So he had to decide which pawn to push up, kicking that queen. He chose e4. The queen went to e6. King g2, keeping the queen out of h3. And knight d4. Very nice square there for the knight. f4 from Jim. Played after 1 minute and 38 seconds thought. Black took on f4. And rook takes. Jim says the plan is to go bishop b2. That is a lovely diagonal for the bishop. We want to go there. Knight d5 played after 2 minutes and 2 seconds. And Jim says, I had not seen this coming at all. I don't know if it works. But props to my opponent for finding this idea. And yes, it's the engine's first choice. And the engine claims that the piece sacrifice is correct. But only leads to an equal position. Very nice move. And you can only refute a sacrifice by accepting it. Jim takes. Jim says, I had to take the risk. Queen takes. And here, knight e4 is the best move. But Jim didn't find it. He played a bad one. He played king h3. And that would give black the chance to get a very good position. An even winning position with rook e2. That rook is defended by the knight. Can we not remove the defender? Can we not play rook takes d4? Attacking the queen. And now the rook on e2 is unprotected. Did black blunder? No. Black has an intermediate move. Queen g2 check. And it is black who's winning. So after king h3, rook e2 is the best move for black. But black did not find it. And after 3 minutes and 12 seconds, he played rook e6. It makes sense. He wants to swing the rook over. He wants to attack the white king. But with rook e2, he would have had a better version of this. Knight e4 played after 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Opening up a couple of pieces and blocking some of his pieces, Jim says. Indeed, this bishop is now a bit happier. And the knight is active in the middle of the board. Rook h6. Rook h4. Those rooks were swapped. And queen f5. Threatening knight f3 check. Jim found g4. Hitting the queen. Queen to e5. And king back to h3. And now f5 was played. Jim took. Queen takes check. King g2. White's king is in the open. The white king is not happy at all with that black queen and knight very close to the king. Queen and knight is a lethal combination, and if black will be able to get his rook into the attack as well, then he has a very strong attack. But for the moment, white is still standing. Rook f8 was played, and Jim says surprisingly he doesn't have an immediate threat. And that is indeed very surprising. So Jim had a chance to bring his bishop into the game, helping out the king. And now knight takes c2. Black saw that he wins the piece back if white takes it. And Jim took it and says, this makes my job harder. And he says what he should have played, and indeed the engine confirms he should have played bishop takes a7 instead. And the line goes as follows. The knight is hanging on c2, but can take on a3. But then there is queen b3 check with a double attack. Picking up the knight. King h8. Queen takes. Queen f3 check. King g1. Queen g4 check. And knight g3. And Jim says, my two minor pieces defend my king. And they do indeed. White is winning with his two extra pieces. One that was sacrificed and one that he picked up on a3. So here bishop takes a7 is the best move, but queen takes c2 was played. Picking up that piece straight away. But now black will win white's bishop. Also with a double attack. Queen f3 check. King g1 and take the bishop. And black still has compensation for the piece. Yes, he has 2 pawns, compensation in material. But more importantly, the position of white's king keeps being a problem for white. And with queen and rook, the white king is still under heavy attack. Knight f2 to shield the check. The queen also covers that knight. Queen g5 check. King stepped in a corner. Queen back to e3. Now the knight is hanging. Attacked by queen and rook, only defended by the queen. Knight e4. Queen f3 check. King G1 and we see a move repetition. But the game is not over. Because after Queen E3 check, Jim says there was an offer of a perpetual, which I declined. He played Knight F2 back. And black has to come up with something else. He came up with Rook F6, another rook lift. The other rook also was lifted to the 6th rank. And now black does the same thing with his second rook. And here, after 40 seconds of thought, Jim made a mistake. He took on b7, saying going for a counter-attack against black's king. After I played this, I realized I gave up my back rank. And Queen E1 check does draw. And it does indeed. White's back rank is now weak. And King G2, Rook G6 check, King F3, Rook F6 check. And there is nothing that White can do to avoid the checks from the Rook. This game is a draw. But after Rook takes B7, Black did not find it. He was clearly out for a draw. He tried a move repetition earlier, a perpetual check. And now he went about it the wrong way. He played Rook G6 check first, and that is not the right way to do it. Because now, King F1, and Jim says, finally my king is safe, and indeed there are no more checks. And White still has that extra piece. Rook F6, Rook B8 check, King F7, and there goes another pawn with check. White is winning now. King G6, and White was able to swap the queens with Queen G3. Queen takes, H takes, the dust has settled, says Jim. And White is simply a full piece up now. He's not even any pawns down anymore. Jim says often people ignorantly say positions are won and they just stop analyzing, believing it's a cakewalk from here. But people make mistakes a lot, and I think it's instructive to look at won positions too, just to make sure we know how to win. Yes, there's nothing more difficult than a winning position. I'm not sure who said that, but it is true. Because of the psychological pressure, you really do not want to mess it up. How does Jim play this? Rook A6 was played, attacking the A3 pawn. Jim defends it and says this pawn is worth defending. And it is indeed. We're not just going to give away pawns, are we? Black activates the king, and so does White. G5, King F3, and H5. Jim activates his knight. Yes, that's what we want to do. Also in the endgame, we want to make sure our pieces are as active as possible. H4. The one thing White has to avoid is that all pawns get swapped, because then there will be an endgame of rook and knight versus a rook. And that is a draw. Objectively, difficult to defend, but also difficult to win. But Jim saw that he can win a pawn here with rook b5 check, with a double attack on the g5 pawn, and that pawn will fall. King g6, rook takes, king h6, and White picks up another one, and now the win is very easy. Yes, black can take on a3, king e3, defending the d3 pawn. Black has only one trump card left, that's the a pawn, but that pawn will not go very far. Knight d6, rook a1, knight c4, attacking that pawn with two pieces. So you have to play it up. And rook a5. Jim says rooks behind passed pawns are better than rooks in front of them. And that is true. Rook h1, attacking the h4 pawn, but White has a nice move. Knight d6. Preventing rook takes h4, Jim says, because of the knight fork. And the next move, I will take the a4 pawn and protect the h4 pawn. Yes, it all works out perfectly for White. If you take the pawn, then there is this juicy fork. And White wins easily. Very nice move, knight d6. Black tried rook h3 check. Why not give a check? King d2, king h7, and there goes the a4 pawn. The h4 pawn is protected, and there's really nothing else to play for. Black resigned here, and Jim says, I'm happy with this game, and was very relieved when the queens came off the board. And he says, thank you Chess to Impress for showcasing this game. If you upload it, and I will upload it. And I want to thank you, Jim, or whatever your name is, for sending in this game and for annotating it so extensively. It was a very nice game, very instructive, and a great win for you against a higher rated opponent. And what about our game, Rick against the Chess to Impress viewers? It's also a very interesting struggle, like the game that we just saw played by Jim. Let's put the position on the board. We are at move 15. I played a4, and let's see what suggestions you came up with for the 15th move for black. And it was not a close call at all. 25 viewers suggested a move, and 15 of those 25 suggested knight b6 to d7. 2 people wanted to play knight f6 to h7. Our hero Jim is one of those 2 people. a6 a5 was suggested twice, as was bishop d7. Knight b6 takes d5 is a knight sacrifice. And knight f to d7 was suggested once, as well as knight h5. Like Bobby Fischer, this viewer said, referring to the 3rd match game of the World Championship match. Fischer-Spassky in Reykjavik, when Fischer played knight h5 in a Benoni and won, but it was a completely different position. So knight b to d7 is your move, and now it's my move. I announced last week that I wanted to gain more space on the queen side, pushing a5, and why not do that? I move a5, take the b6 square away from you, and I like my position. But there's still a long way to go. It's very complex, very rich, and it is your move again on move 16. What would you play here? You can take part in this game by putting your suggestion for black's 16th move in the comment section underneath this video. By doing that, you will also be in the raffle. At the end of the game, I will raffle a chess book made available by my sponsor, The Beste Zet, a web shop for chess books. I'm looking forward to seeing your suggestions, and I hope you will take part in our game. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.